The black dress felt like armor as I stood at the entrance of the funeral home, my hand trembling on the brass door handle. My phone buzzed with notifications, Paige's desperate messages about what was happening inside. I'd rehearsed this moment countless times since receiving the call about Dad's passing 3 weeks ago, but nothing could have prepared me for the digital spectacle unfolding both online and in person. Only immediate family is permitted today, the sharp voice cut through the somber atmosphere like a knife. Gwendolyn, my stepmother of 3 years, blocked the doorway with her perfectly manicured hand, the same hand that had been posting artfully filtered photos of the grieving widow on Instagram all morning. Her face was a mask of practiced sorrow, not a single tear smudging her immaculate makeup. "I'm Meredith, and this is my father's funeral," I replied, my voice cracking slightly. "The father who raised me alone after Mom died, who taught me to ride a bike, who beamed with pride at my college graduation. And here I was, being denied entry to say my final goodbye. I am family," I managed to say, my voice stronger than I felt. "He was my father." Gwendolyn's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Was being the operative word, dear. "I'm his wife, and I make the decisions now. We're keeping this intimate, to respect Lawrence's wishes." Behind her, I could see familiar faces filling the chapel through the half-open door, Dad's golf buddies, business associates he barely knew, even her personal trainer. My phone buzzed again, another message from Paige with a photo of Gwendolyn posing solemnly beside the casket for what was clearly a social media update. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, stepping forward and holding up my phone. "You're letting in Dad's accountant who met him twice, but blocking his daughter while posting funeral selfies?" "Meredith," a familiar voice called out. My cousin Paige pushed past Gwendolyn, wrapping me in a tight hug that smelled of comfort and home. "I've been texting you for an hour. This is insane." Gwendolyn's facade cracked slightly as she glanced around nervously. She couldn't stop Paige without creating a scene, and maintaining her carefully crafted public image was everything to her. "Let her in," a deep voice commanded. Bennett, Dad's longtime lawyer, appeared beside Gwendolyn. His presence carried an authority that even she couldn't ignore. "Mr. Harmon specifically requested his daughter's presence in his final arrangements, as you well know." Gwendolyn's nostrils flared, but she stepped aside, subtly checking her reflection in her phone screen as she did. As I walked past her, she whispered, "Enjoy the show, darling. There won't be much left for Daddy's little office manager when this is over." The service was a blur of faces and voices. I sat in the front row, Paige's hand squeezing mine, as speakers shared memories of Dad. Gwendolyn played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief while her sister Vivian discreetly filmed parts of the service. During the eulogy, I noticed Garrett, Dad's friend from college days and my godfather, watching me intently. He whispered something to Gwendolyn, who nodded slightly with a tight smile. The exchange made my skin crawl. After the service, Bennett approached me. "Meredith, we need to discuss the will reading tomorrow. Your father left very specific instructions." "What kind of instructions?" I asked, noticing how Gwendolyn suddenly appeared interested in our conversation, sliding her phone into her purse. "Everything will be clear tomorrow," Bennett said carefully. "Just know that your father prepared thoroughly for this moment." "Surely we can handle this privately, Bennett," Gwendolyn interrupted, placing her hand on his arm and flashing the smile that had graced countless society pages. No need to burden Meredith with these matters so soon after her loss. She must be overwhelmed, poor thing. Bennett removed her hand firmly. "The reading is at 2 p.m. tomorrow in Lawrence's study at the estate. All parties must be present." As people began filtering out, Paige pulled me aside, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck. "Something's not right, Mayor." Have you seen the estate's transformation lately? Gwendolyn's been spending money like water. That tennis court she built last month, the new pool house, all while documenting everything for her lifestyle brand. I hadn't visited the estate since Dad married Gwendolyn. The few times I tried, she'd made excuses about Dad being too busy or too tired, though his social calendar seemed mysteriously full on her social feeds. She's up to something, Paige continued, lowering her voice. And Garrett's acting strange. I overheard him and Gwendolyn talking about offshore accounts in something called Marina Holdings last week. Before I could respond, Bennett pressed an envelope into my hands. Your father wanted you to have this before tomorrow's reading. Don't open it until you're alone. The envelope felt heavy, like it carried more than just paper. As I left the funeral home, Gwendolyn's voice carried across the parking lot. Don't forget to check your WhatsApp, darling. I've sent you a heartfelt message about your father. Her perfect smile didn't match the mockery in her tone as she posed for a final photo with the funeral director. Dad had built his legacy from nothing, working countless hours to create something meaningful. His affordable housing developments had changed thousands of lives. I wouldn't let Gwendolyn destroy that for another mansion or a following on Instagram. In my car, I held the envelope Bennett had given me, feeling its weight. Whatever was inside, I knew it was the key to understanding what was really going on. Dad had always told me to trust my instincts, and right now they were screaming that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than a cruel stepmother. My phone pinged with a message from Paige. Coming over tonight. Don't do anything until I get there. And Mayor, Lawrence would be so proud of how you handled today. I started the car, catching a glimpse of Gwendolyn watching from the funeral home steps, phone in hand, probably dictating some heartfelt post about her loss. She raised her hand in a wave that felt more like a warning. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't just Daddy's little girl anymore. I was a woman who'd inherited his determination, and I would protect everything he stood for. The envelope sat heavy in my purse as I drove home, carrying what I hoped were the answers I needed to set things right. Dad's study next day. Dad's study felt sacred yet unfamiliar as we gathered for the reading of his will. The room had been redecorated since I'd last seen it, Gwendolyn's touch evident in the sleek modern furniture that had replaced Dad's beloved leather chairs. She sat across from me, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Paige squeezed my hand under the table as Bennett entered with a thick folder and a small digital projector. Before we begin, Bennett said, setting up the equipment, I want to note that Lawrence was very specific about how this meeting should proceed. He recorded a video statement to accompany the formal reading. I'd spent the night reading Dad's letter repeatedly. It contained just 3 words, trust the process, along with a small key I didn't recognize. Classic Dad, always teaching lessons, even from beyond. The projector lit up, and suddenly Dad's face filled the wall, tired but determined, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he was about to surprise me. The timestamp showed the recording was made just 2 weeks before his death. After the brief video introduction, Bennett cleared his throat and began the formal reading. To my wife, Gwendolyn, he began, and I watched her lips curl into a satisfied smile as she discreetly checked her reflection in her compact mirror. I leave you the contents of our joint account, totaling approximately $250,000. Gwendolyn's compact snapped shut. That's impossible. There must be more. Her voice rose sharply, the practiced poise slipping. To my daughter, Meredith Harmon, Bennett continued, ignoring her interruption, I leave the following: full ownership of Harmon Enterprises, all remaining financial assets, and complete control of the family estate, including my majority shareholding in the Marina project. What? Gwendolyn shot to her feet, her face contorting with rage. This is outrageous. I was his wife. That company is worth millions. There's more, Bennett said firmly, projecting a document on the wall. A special clause states that any financial decisions regarding the estate or company must receive Meredith's written approval. This includes any transactions made in the past 3 months. The color drained from Gwendolyn's perfectly made-up face. The past 3 months? He can't do that retroactively. I've made significant investments. Actually, he can, Bennett replied, sliding a document across the table. As the majority shareholder, he put this clause into effect 90 days ago when he first suspected irregularities. All transactions during this period require review and approval, including the new lifestyle brand you've been developing using company resources. Garrett, who had been quietly observing from the corner chair, suddenly looked uncomfortable, tugging at his collar. Surely there's room for some negotiation. There's also mention of a specially protected asset, Bennett added, known only as the Marina Project. Gwendolyn's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass, knocking over her phone in the process. I'd never seen her lose that perfect composure before. What's the Marina Project? I asked, leaning forward. That information will be revealed once all recent transactions are properly audited, Bennett explained, his voice steady. Your father was extraordinarily thorough in his planning, right down to the timing of these revelations. Paige leaned forward, her photographer's instinct capturing every detail of the moment. So all those renovations you've been documenting on social media, Gwendolyn, the new cars, the wellness spa, they all needed Meredith's approval? This is utterly absurd. Gwendolyn snapped, her refined accent slipping. I was managing Lawrence's estate as his wife. We had an understanding. By spending millions on luxury items and using company resources to launch your lifestyle brand? I finally spoke up, finding strength in my father's foresight. Dad lived modestly his entire life, despite his success. The only thing he ever splurged on was my education and his affordable housing projects. Gwendolyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly lined lips thinning. You have no idea what your father wanted. We discussed every decision together. He understood my needs. Then you won't mind showing me the paperwork for all these discussions, I replied calmly, drawing on my management experience. Bennett, I'd like a full audit of all accounts and transactions from the past 3 months, plus a complete review of the Marina Project documentation. You can't do this to me. Gwendolyn hissed, her elegant facade crumbling. I made your father happy. I gave him social connections. You made him a stranger, I corrected her, the pain of recent months rising in my throat. I couldn't even visit him in his final weeks, because you always had an excuse. Yet somehow he was well enough to appear at your charity galas. Garrett stood up, palms extended. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to collect ourselves. Sit down. Bennett commanded with unexpected force. There's one final item. Lawrence left a video message specifically for this moment. He tapped on his tablet, and suddenly Dad's face filled the large wall screen. He looked tired but determined, sitting in this very study. Meredith, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything in person, but I needed to protect what I built. The Marina Project contains everything you need to know. Bennett will guide you. He paused, his expression hardening. And Gwendolyn. I know about Vivian and the funds. Gwendolyn gasped audibly, her hand flying to her throat. Next to her, Vivian, who had been silently texting throughout the proceedings, suddenly looked up, her face draining of color. What's he talking about? I demanded, looking between them. What funds? Meeting adjourned. Garrett announced with forced cheerfulness. Meredith, please stay behind. We have important documents to sign. As Gwendolyn stormed out, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor, Paige caught her arm. Those social media brand deals you signed last week using the company letterhead? Better keep the receipts. Once they left, Bennett handed me a USB drive in the shape of a small boat key. Your father recorded everything, Meredith. But be careful what you'll find. It's far bigger than Gwendolyn's spending habits or social climbing. The Marina project, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, what exactly is it? He smiled slightly, a hint of pride in his eyes. Your father suspected something was wrong months ago when certain investors became too interested in his affordable housing development. He set this entire scenario up to protect you and the company. Paige, who had stayed behind, pulled out her phone. You should see this, Mayor. Vivian just posted, then deleted, about her new boutique expansion in Europe. The geotag matches perfectly with transfers from your dad's business accounts. I took the USB drive, feeling its weight in my palm. Dad always said the truth comes with digital and paper receipts in the modern world. Be extremely careful, Bennett warned, his voice low. Gwendolyn has cultivated powerful friends. She won't go down without a very public fight. As we left the study, I noticed Garrett making a heated phone call in the garden. He turned away when he saw me, but I caught two distinct phrases, she knows and Marina exposure. Paige linked her arm through mine as we walked to my car. Ready to dive into that USB drive? I brought my laptop with the photo analysis software. I nodded, thinking of Dad's words, trust the process. Let's see what other safeguards my father built into his final plan. The Marina project was waiting, and with it, the truth about what really happened in Dad's final months. Gwendolyn thought she had won with her carefully crafted public image, but she didn't know my father like I did. He always played the long game, several moves ahead. Meredith's apartment evening, Paige and I huddled around my kitchen table, her laptop glowing in the dimly lit room. My hands shook slightly as I inserted the boat-shaped USB drive and folders appeared on screen, financial records, surveillance files, and one simply labeled Marina. Look at this, Paige pointed to a series of screenshots, bank transfers from the company account to something called VF Designs. VF? I muttered, the pieces connecting. Vivian Fleming. Gwendolyn's sister. That's why her boutique suddenly expanded to Milan last month. A sharp knock at my door made us both jump. Through the peephole, I saw Garrett standing there, shifting nervously, looking over his shoulder at the street. What do you want? I called through the door, not ready to trust him. Just 5 minutes, Meredith. Please. It's about your father and what really happened, his voice sounded strained. I glanced at Paige, who shook her head vigorously. But something in his voice, fear mixed with genuine concern, made me unlock the door, though I kept the chain on. Make it quick, I said through the narrow opening. Garrett looked exhausted, his usual polished hotel owner appearance disheveled. You need to be extremely careful. Gwendolyn and her circle, they're not who you think they are. The connections go deep. Really? And where exactly do you stand in all this, Uncle Garrett? I asked pointedly, using the childhood name I'd called him. He hesitated, running a hand through his silver hair. Let's just say I've been playing a complicated role. I was your father's roommate in college, his friend for 40 years. He asked me to keep an eye on things from the inside, but it got more complicated than either of us expected. Complicated how? I pressed. The Marina project, it isn't just an affordable housing development. It's, a car horn blared insistently outside. Garrett jumped, looking over his shoulder with genuine fear in his eyes. I've said too much already. Check the security footage from March 15th. Your father's office camera. The one behind the sailing trophy. Before I could respond, he hurried away, limping slightly. Through the window, I watched him climb into a black SUV where someone waited in the driver's seat. Well, that was cryptic and disturbing, Paige said, already searching through the files for the March 15th footage. The video showed Dad's office at night. Gwendolyn entered, followed by Vivian in her signature all-black designer outfit. They went straight to Dad's wall safe behind the family portrait. "Turn up the volume," I whispered, leaning closer. "I can't keep stalling the investors," Vivian was saying, her voice tight with stress. "They want concrete answers about the marina property. The luxury development plans are already being drawn up." "Lawrence suspects something," Gwendolyn replied, perfectly manicured fingers trying combinations on the safe. "He's changed all the passwords, moved accounts around. He's been meeting with that Bennett too often." "Then accelerate the timeline," Vivian hissed. "The deadline's approaching, and we need those land title documents. Our investors aren't patient people." I felt physically sick. Paige paused the video, her face pale in the blue light of the screen. "Mayor, look at the date stamp. It's exactly 2 weeks before your dad's heart attack." My phone buzzed, a WhatsApp message from Bennett. "Found something critical in your father's private storage. Meet me at the office immediately. Come alone, except for Paige if she's with you." Bennett's office. 30 minutes later, 20 minutes later, we sat in Bennett's downtown office as he spread documents across his antique mahogany desk, the city lights twinkling through the windows behind him. "Your father came to me about 3 months ago with concerns about suspicious financial activities at the company," Bennett explained, his voice steady but grave. "Large sums were being diverted through a series of shell corporations, all ultimately linked to VF Designs." "Vivian Fleming," I confirmed, the pieces falling into place. "Yes, but the web extends much deeper," Bennett continued, showing us a complex diagram of money flows. "She's partnered with some exceptionally questionable real estate developers with international connections. The marina project was meant to be your father's crowning achievement, affordable housing for seniors with integrated healthcare facilities, but Gwendolyn and Vivian were secretly working to transform it into luxury waterfront condos," Paige guessed, scanning through documents with her trained photographer's eye, with deliberately inflated construction costs, secret kickbacks, and foreign investor schemes. Bennett nodded grimly. "Lawrence discovered their plan quite by accident when reviewing some architectural changes. He immediately began gathering evidence quietly. That's when things took a dangerous turn." "Still burning the midnight oil," Bennett, a familiar voice, interrupted smoothly. Gwendolyn stood in the doorway, Vivian beside her, both dressed in impeccable evening wear as if coming from an event. My stomach twisted at seeing them together, the sisterly resemblance more pronounced now that I knew what I did. "Just catching up on paperwork before the weekend," Bennett replied with professional calm, casually sliding the most damning documents into a folder. "How very dedicated," Gwendolyn smiled coldly, her perfect teeth gleaming. "Meredith, darling, I was hoping we could have a civilized conversation about your father's wishes without all this unpleasantness. His wishes seem perfectly clear from both the will and his video message," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "Things aren't always what they appear to be." Vivian stepped forward, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Legal documents can be so complicated. Signatures get misinterpreted, amendments get misfiled. Is that a threat?" Paige stood up, her camera hanging around her neck like a weapon. "A friendly reality check," Gwendolyn corrected, adjusting her diamond bracelet. "Meredith, be sensible. You're a middle management employee who coordinates office supplies and company parties. You know nothing about running a multi-million-dollar property development company. Let those with experience handle Lawrence's legacy properly. I thought of Dad's video message, his tired but determined eyes, his explicit warning. You're right, I don't know everything about running a company of this size, I admitted. But I know that Dad trusted me to learn. And I absolutely know the difference between right and wrong. Your father had a weak heart, Vivian said quietly, examining her manicure. Stress can be unpredictable. Especially when it comes to family disappointments. The threat hung heavy in the air. Bennett's hand moved toward his phone, subtly pressing the recording button. We'll be in touch, Gwendolyn said, turning to leave with practiced grace. Oh, and Meredith, that security footage you're so interested in, digital evidence is so fragile these days. Files corrupt, servers crash, cloud storage fails. Such a pity when that happens. After they clicked their way out, Bennett immediately called building security to post guards at both his office and the company's evidence rooms. They're getting desperate, he observed, his usual professional composure slipping slightly to reveal genuine concern. Good, I said, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Because now we know what really happened to Dad. Paige squeezed my shoulder, her touch grounding me. We need to move faster. If they're willing to threaten you so openly, they won't hesitate to take more drastic measures. Bennett agreed, locking his desk drawer. But we have advantages they don't know about. Your father left one final safeguard, something even I wasn't fully briefed on. He called it the ultimate receipt. I opened the Marina folder on the USB drive, a flood of understanding washing over me as I browsed through the meticulously organized files. Dad hadn't just left scattered evidence, he'd created a comprehensive trail of breadcrumbs, each leading to the next piece of the truth. Time to follow his path, I said, thinking of Gwendolyn's smug, confident face, the woman who thought her social media perfect life had won everything. She's about to lose it all. Meredith's apartment late night, the Marina Project files revealed a shocking web of deception that made my blood boil. Forged contracts with fake signatures, deliberately inflated development costs, elaborate kickback schemes, and a complex trail of money leading to offshore accounts in tax havens. But it was the last document that stopped me cold, a medical report from Dad's personal physician, dated just 3 days before his death. No signs of cardiovascular disease whatsoever, I read aloud to Paige, my voice shaking. Blood work excellent. Heart function normal for a man 15 years younger. No indications of any conditions that might lead to sudden cardiac arrest. My phone rang, the screen lighting up with Gwendolyn's name and a photo of her with Dad that she'd posted on Instagram months ago. What do you want? I answered, putting it on speaker. Dinner tomorrow night. Just us girls, her voice dripped with honey, the socialite charm turned up to maximum. The estate, at 7. There are some things about your father you really ought to know, Meredith. Things that might change your perspective on recent developments. Paige shook her head frantically, mouthing no over and over, but I already knew my answer. I'll be there. Excellent. We'll have Marcella prepare Lawrence's favorite dishes. Are you completely insane? Paige exploded after I hung up. After what we just found? They practically admitted to killing your father. I'll be wearing a wire, I said calmly, tapping my phone. Bennett already arranged it with a private security firm. We need to get them talking on record. The estate next evening, the family estate looked different as I drove up the long curved driveway, colder somehow, its warmth and history swallowed by Gwendolyn's modern renovations. She answered the door herself in a silk designer loungewear set, champagne glass in one perfectly manicured hand. Meredith, darling, right on time. Vivian is joining us, of course. They led me to the formal dining room, where Dad's prized vintage wine collection was displayed like props in their elaborately staged performance. "Your father," Gwendolyn began, pouring a rare Bordeaux I knew cost thousands. "I didn't touch mine," was a far more complicated man than you realize. "Really?" He always seemed remarkably straightforward to me. Vivian laughed softly, the sound like glass breaking. "Oh, sweetie, you didn't know him like we did. The public Lawrence Harmon versus the private one." "You mean you didn't know him at all?" I countered, leaning forward. "Let's cut to the chase. Tell me about VF Designs and how it connects to the Marina project." The sisters exchanged lightning-quick glances. "A completely legitimate business arrangement," Vivian said carefully, her fingers tightening around her wine stem. "Like the altered architectural plans for the Marina project? Those fake contracts must have taken ages to forge. Did you pay off the original architects, or just threaten them?" Gwendolyn's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "Careful, dear. Some things are better left buried. Like certain medical records that might raise uncomfortable questions about your father's sudden heart attack." The temperature in the luxurious dining room seemed to plummet. Vivian's practiced smile became fixed and artificial. "You're in way over your head," Gwendolyn said quietly. "Walk away now. Take a generous settlement. We'll even throw in that charming downtown apartment you've always admired. Live your life without looking back. Or what? I'll have a convenient accident?" "Things happen," Vivian shrugged with chilling casualness. "Companies face unexpected bankruptcies, files mysteriously disappear, people occasionally vanish." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Is that what happened to Dad? Did he vanish when he discovered what you were doing with his life's work?" "Your father was painfully idealistic," Gwendolyn spat, her elegant mask finally slipping. "He was going to throw away everything we'd built because of his precious conscience. Affordable housing? The property is worth 10 times more as luxury developments." "You mean everything he built while you were planning to steal it?" "Steal?" Vivian laughed, sharp and brittle. "We improved the vision. Those luxury condos would have made hundreds of millions more than his ridiculous senior housing plan. The profit margins were astronomical. And the kickbacks from the foreign developers, the money laundering through VF Designs." "Enough." Gwendolyn slammed her hand on the table, rattling the crystal. "You want to play hardball? Fine. Check your company email tomorrow. Those photos of you getting a little too close to your married department head 3 years ago might interest the board of directors." I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Blackmail? Really?" I was attending a company retreat, and he was drunk and inappropriate. I reported it to HR immediately. But this conversation, now that's truly interesting. I pulled out my phone, stopping the recording app and displaying the active screen. Their faces went chalk white beneath their perfect makeup. "You manipulative little," Vivian lunged for the phone. "It's already uploaded to 3 separate secure cloud locations," I said, stepping back quickly. "And those medical records showing Dad had no heart problems? Copies are with Bennett and 2 other attorneys with instructions to release them if anything happens to me." "Get out," Gwendolyn whispered, her composure completely shattered. "Get out of my house." "Your house." I looked around the familiar walls that held my childhood memories. "The will says differently. You have until noon tomorrow to pack your essentials. The security codes will be changed at 12:01. As I turned to leave, Gwendolyn called after me, her voice shaking with fury. "You have no idea what you're doing. The Marina project has powerful international investors. They won't let you interfere with this development." "Watch me," I replied without turning back. Outside, Paige was waiting in her car across the street, camera with telephoto lens ready. "Did you get it?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. I nodded, hands shaking now that it was over. They practically confessed to everything. They didn't even try to hide it. But they mentioned investors, powerful ones. That sounds ominous. Bennett called while you were inside, Paige continued, starting the car. He found something in the company's archived server backups. Someone systematically deleted files immediately after your dad died, but the IT director had set up an automatic backup system your father requested. My phone buzzed with a text from Garrett, "Need to meet urgently." It's about the investors and what they're capable of. Another text came through almost immediately, this time from an unknown number, "Back off from Marina, or your heart might suddenly fail too. Final warning." I showed Paige the threat. "They're terrified of what we know." "Good God, Mare, this is beyond serious." Paige gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Maybe we should go to the FBI now, before." "No," I cut her off firmly. Dad died trying to protect his vision and gather enough evidence to stop them completely. I won't let his sacrifice be for nothing. As we drove away, I saw Gwendolyn watching from the window, phone pressed to her ear. She was calling someone, probably those mysterious investors she'd threatened me with. Let them come, I thought with newfound determination. Dad had taught me well through his example: always keep receipts, always have a backup plan, and never show your full hand until the final move. The real battle was just beginning. Coffee shop. Next morning, the artisanal coffee shop was nearly empty when Garrett slid into the booth across from me, looking haggard and anxious. Paige sat at a nearby table, pretending to edit photos on her laptop while keeping watch. "You're taking an enormous risk meeting me," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the street. "Talk fast," I replied, discreetly recording on my phone under the table. "Who are these investors Gwendolyn keeps threatening me with?" "They're not just ordinary developers or financiers," he explained in a low, urgent voice. "They're connected to serious international players who use real estate developments for cleaning money. Your father discovered they were planning to use the Marina project as a massive laundering operation. And you know all this how?" He pulled out a small, weathered thumb drive. "Because I helped Lawrence gather evidence. That's why he kept me close to Gwendolyn, pretending to be her ally. I was your father's eyes and ears from the beginning." Bennett's office. Breaking news. Before I could respond, Bennett burst into the coffee shop, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. "We need to leave immediately. Someone broke into both my office and the company records room." "What did they take?" I asked, grabbing my bag and signaling to Paige. "Nothing, that's what's disturbing," Bennett replied, holding up his phone to show us a photo of his ransacked office. On his polished desk sat a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, deliberately splattered with what looked like red paint. "They left this instead." Garrett went deathly pale, his hands visibly shaking. "It's starting. That's their signature warning, their calling card." We relocated to Paige's artist loft apartment in a converted warehouse, spreading the contents of both USB drives across her photography editing table, the urban skyline visible through the industrial windows. "Look at this," Bennett pointed to a document hidden deep in the financial folders. "Wire transfers from the Marina Project's development fund to a shell company called Queen's Acquisitions. That's Vivian's front company," Garrett explained, his hotel management experience evident in his understanding of the complex financial web. "But it's just the first layer. The real money flows through multiple shells before reaching the actual investors. Lawrence tracked it through 6 different countries." My phone buzzed with an email notification from an anonymous account. The subject line read simply, "Watch this." The attached video showed Dad in his office, his face flushed with anger as he argued with someone off camera. "You can't do this." Dad's voice was clear and determined. "These people trusted us with their retirement savings for affordable housing, not luxury speculation. They'll get a better return this way," Gwendolyn's voice replied smoothly from off-screen. "Everyone benefits from the upscale development. It's simple economics, Lawrence. It's fraud, and you know it." Dad slammed his hand on the desk. "I'm shutting down the entire project before it's corrupted further." "That would be extremely unwise, Mr. Harmon," a man's voice, cultured, accented, and completely unfamiliar, interjected calmly. "Consider your daughter's position. Her career. Her safety." The video abruptly cut off. Another email arrived seconds later. "Back off, or the next video reveals your father's final moments." Not a peaceful heart attack after all. "They're bluffing," Paige insisted, though her photographer's steady hands were now trembling. "They wouldn't keep evidence like that." "No," Garrett stood up, his expression grave. "They're not bluffing at all. I was there that night. I saw what happened when a sharp crack split the air. The window behind Garrett shattered as he dropped to the floor with a cry of pain. Nobody move," Bennett commanded, already dialing his phone. "Stay away from the windows. Private security team is on the way." Garrett clutched his bleeding shoulder, his face contorted with pain. "Just a graze," he gasped. "They're sending us a very clear message about how serious they are." While waiting for Bennett's security team, I checked my email again. A new message contained just an address and time: Lakeside Marina, Dock 7. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone with all evidence copies, or the next shot won't miss. Your father made his choice. Make yours wisely. The security team arrived, followed by police officers who took statements but seemed overwhelmed by the implications. I could tell by their carefully neutral expressions that they couldn't or wouldn't help with something this complex involving wealthy, connected people. After they left, Bennett pulled me into Paige's kitchen, speaking quietly. "There's something else critical. Your father left a safety deposit box at Garrison Trust Bank. I gained access this morning using the key from his personal effects. Inside was a single sealed document, comprehensive evidence of money laundering through Queen's acquisitions, with names, dates, account numbers, and the identities of the real investors. This is it," I breathed, adrenaline surging through me. "This is what they killed him to protect." "There's more," Bennett said, his voice dropping further. "Look at the final signature page." He showed me his phone with a photograph of the document. There, among the Queen's Acquisitions board members, is a signature we all recognize. Vivian Fleming, Paige realized, looking over my shoulder. She wasn't just Gwendolyn's sister. She was the primary connection to the international investors all along, Bennett confirmed. Gwendolyn was just the public face, the social connection to your father. My phone rang with Gwendolyn's distinctive ringtone. "Enjoying our little demonstration?" she asked when I answered on speaker, her voice eerily calm. "You won't get away with this," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Oh, darling, but I already have. Ask dear Garrett about March 15th. Ask him what your father's actual last words were as he realized what was in his evening scotch." I looked at Garrett, who couldn't meet my eyes, his wounded shoulder momentarily forgotten. "You have precisely 1 hour to surrender all copies of the evidence," Gwendolyn continued, her socialite charm completely gone. "Or the next video goes public, the one showing how your principled father begged for his life at the end. Think of the family legacy, Meredith." The line went dead. "She's lying," Paige insisted, her face white with shock. "She has to be." Lawrence wouldn't beg. But Garrett was shaking his head, wincing with the movement. I'm so sorry, Meredith. I was supposed to protect him that night, but I arrived too late. They were already there. Then help me now, I said, kneeling beside him. Tell me everything you know. He took a deep breath, grimacing with pain. The video they're threatening to release exists, but what they don't know is that your father was wearing a recording device that night, one they never found. The complete recording with everything that actually happened, it's hidden in a place only Lawrence would think to use. The marina, Bennett suddenly exclaimed, understanding dawning on his face. The actual marina. Your father's beloved boat slip where he kept the Evelyn Marie. Memories flooded back, weekends on that boat named after Mom, Dad teaching me to fish, pointing out constellations in the night sky. He always told me the water was where he felt closest to Mom, and where he kept his most important thoughts. We have exactly 1 hour, I said, standing up with newfound determination. Let's make every minute count. Outside Page's building, a black luxury SUV crawled slowly past. They were watching, waiting for us to make our next move. But they didn't know what I knew about Dad's habits and hiding places. His favorite saying echoed in my mind, the best place to hide something important is in plain sight, where only those who truly understand you would think to look. The marina held the final truth, and this time I was ready for whatever and whoever waited in the shadows. The marina evening, the marina's security lights cast eerie blue shadows across the wooden docks as we approached Dad's long-held boat slip. The Evelyn Marie, named after Mom, sat quietly in the dark water, gently rocking with the small waves. 2 vehicles following us, Paige whispered from the back seat, her camera ready. Black Escalade and a silver Mercedes sedan with tinted windows. Let them come, I said, pulling into the parking lot with newfound determination. Garrett, you're absolutely certain about this? He nodded, wincing as he adjusted the makeshift bandage on his shoulder. Your father came here every Sunday morning in the month before he died. He told Gwendolyn he was clearing his head and organizing his thoughts. She never suspected this was where he was assembling his case. Bennett met us at the dock entrance, accompanied by 2 discreet security professionals. Marina security cameras have been temporarily looped with old footage, he explained, handing me a small toolkit. We have a maximum of 20 minutes before the system automatically resets. The boat's cabin was exactly as I remembered from my childhood, worn leather seats with Dad's reading glasses still in the side pocket, the old-fashioned navigation system he refused to upgrade, and his lucky fishing hat still hanging from the hook by the wheel. But something felt different, changed. The floorboards beneath the captain's chair. Garrett pointed carefully under the main console. There. Lawrence reconfigured that section last year. Bennett worked quickly with a precision screwdriver. The 3rd wooden board lifted smoothly to reveal a professionally waterproofed steel case with a small digital lock. Footsteps on the dock, Paige whispered urgently from her lookout position. Well, isn't this a touching family reunion? Gwendolyn stood at the boat's entrance, Vivian beside her. 4 men in expensive suits spread out behind them along the dock, their posture indicating concealed weapons. You're trespassing on private property, I said, standing up to face them despite my pounding heart. Funny, I was about to say exactly the same thing. Gwendolyn's smile was razor-sharp, her perfectly applied lipstick gleaming in the dock lights. Hand over the case, darling. This little treasure hunt has gone far enough. It's really not what you're imagining, Vivian added, her boutique owner's charm on full display. Your father was becoming quite confused in his final weeks, increasingly paranoid about his business partners. Paranoid enough to wear a recording device? I challenged, watching their expressions carefully. To document everything that happened that night? One of the suited men stepped forward, his Eastern European accent subtle but distinct. "Miss Harmon, you're clearly an intelligent woman with a promising future ahead. Don't waste it on a misguided crusade. Walk away now. Take an extended vacation. Forget what you think you know. Like you made Dad forget?" The words burned my throat as they came out. "With whatever you slipped into his evening scotch that night?" Gwendolyn's perfect composure finally cracked. "You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." "March 15th, I said, the date now forever etched in my mind. Dad confronted you about the Marina project's true purpose, about the money laundering network, about everything. Lawrence was going to expose years of careful planning and hundreds of millions in illegal transactions. We tried to reason with him like civilized people," Vivian snapped, her elegant facade slipping to reveal something cold and hard beneath. "By poisoning him," Bennett's voice was glacial as he stood protectively near me. "By administering a substance that perfectly mimicked a heart attack. By erasing a good man who stood in your way." The suited man moved closer, his hand shifting inside his jacket. "Final chance. The case. Now. You know what's truly ironic about all this?" I said, reaching slowly into my pocket as Paige moved quietly to my side. "Dad taught me something important about boats in life: always have a backup plan." I pulled out my phone, pressed play, and a familiar voice filled the night air. The Marina confrontation, Dad's voice filled the night air, clear and determined through my phone speaker. "If you're hearing this recording, I'm no longer alive. Gwendolyn and Vivian believe they've destroyed all evidence of their operation, but they overlooked something critical. The complete Marina project files, documentation of all offshore accounts, recordings of every meeting with their investors. It's all been delivered to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division through a dead man's switch activated by this boat's security system." Gwendolyn's perfectly made-up face drained of all color. "You're bluffing. Lawrence never had that level of technological sophistication." I showed them my screen displaying the automated email confirmation. The timestamp on this FBI confirmation, exactly 12 minutes ago. Dad programmed the system to transmit everything automatically if his boat's security code was entered tonight, by me specifically. He knew I'd find my way here eventually. Chaos erupted on the narrow dock. Two of the suited men immediately fled toward the parking lot. Vivian lunged desperately for the waterproof case, but Paige was quicker, swinging Dad's old fishing rod like a precise weapon. It connected firmly with Vivian's shoulder, sending her designer-clad figure stumbling backward toward the water's edge. "You manipulative little," Gwendolyn charged toward me, her poised socialite facade completely shattered. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly closer. Bennett smiled tightly, checking his watch. "Precisely on schedule. You set us up." Vivian realized, clutching her injured shoulder, her boutique owner's charm replaced by raw panic. "No," I corrected her with calm satisfaction, "Dad did. Every Sunday morning here, he wasn't just clearing his head as you believed. He was methodically organizing your downfall, piece by piece." Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the marina as multiple vehicles screeched into the parking area. FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed across the docks, weapons drawn. Federal agents. Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them. "Now." Gwendolyn attempted to flee but slipped on the wet wooden planks of the dock. As agents secured her with handcuffs, she screamed hysterically, "This is absurd. You have absolutely nothing concrete. It's all circumstantial." I carefully opened the waterproof case, revealing a specialized laptop and external hard drive with Dad's company logo. "Actually, we have everything. Every transaction, every threat, every meeting. including complete footage from March 15th showing exactly what happened that night. Your father was considerably more intelligent than we anticipated, Vivian said bitterly as agents led her away, her designer outfit incongruous against the tactical gear surrounding her. Garrett stepped forward, still holding his wounded shoulder. Meredith, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you everything sooner. I was trying to protect you from the danger, just as Lawrence asked me to. You helped him when it mattered most, I said, finding unexpected forgiveness. That counts for something significant. As the chaos gradually settled into organized police activity, I sat in Dad's captain's chair, running my fingers over the worn leather that still held the impression of his form. Paige joined me, gently holding Dad's lucky fishing hat she'd rescued during the struggle. There's one more thing you should see, Bennett said, carefully extracting a sealed envelope from a hidden compartment in the case. Your father left this specifically for after the confrontation was resolved. Inside was a single photograph, Dad and me on this very boat, both laughing freely, the sun setting behind us. It was from my 30th birthday celebration just weeks before he met Gwendolyn. On the back, he'd written in his distinctive handwriting, "Justice comes to those who wait patiently. I love you beyond words, sweetheart." The Marina project was always, ultimately, about protecting you and what we value most. The FBI needs our formal statements, Paige said gently, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck. I nodded, standing up with renewed strength. Through the cabin window, I watched as Gwendolyn and Vivian were escorted to separate federal vehicles, their carefully constructed empire of deception crumbling completely in a single evening. Ready to go, Bennett? I asked, gathering my resolve. Almost there, he replied, securing the evidence for the authorities. I carefully hung Dad's lucky fishing hat back on its hook by the wheel. Some things belonged exactly where they had always been. The marina's security lights still cast long shadows across the water, but somehow they didn't seem nearly as threatening anymore. Dad had left me far more than just evidence, he'd left me the unvarnished truth, and sometimes that's the most powerful weapon anyone can possess. Federal Courthouse 3 months later, the federal courthouse hummed with tense anticipation as I took the witness stand. Gwendolyn sat at the defendant's table, her designer wardrobe replaced by standard-issue prison attire, her once perfect manicure now bitten down to the quick. The transformation was startling. Please state your full name for the record, the federal prosecutor began, her voice precise and measured. Meredith and Harmon. And can you positively identify the contents of Evidence Exhibit A for the court? I looked at the specialized laptop and external hard drive that had been recovered from Dad's boat, his final, meticulous gift to justice. Yes. These devices contain comprehensive recordings and documentation detailing the international money laundering operation that was being run through the Marina project development. Objection. Gwendolyn's high-priced attorney stood immediately. Calls for speculation beyond the witness's expertise. Overruled, the judge said firmly. The witness may continue. The prosecutor nodded to the technical assistant, who played the critical March 15th recording. Dad's voice filled the hushed courtroom. I absolutely refuse to let you steal from innocent people. Gwendolyn, these were retirement funds intended for affordable senior housing, not luxury condos for offshore shell companies. You're being ridiculously dramatic, Lawrence. Gwendolyn's recorded voice was chillingly cold and unfamiliar. Everyone takes shortcuts in business. Just take the developer's money and look the other way. Like you're asking me to ignore whatever you've been secretly recording for weeks. Shocked gasps echoed through the packed courtroom. In the present, Gwendolyn's face contorted with uncontrolled rage. That recording is doctored, she shouted, half rising from her seat. He was becoming mentally unstable. "Order in this court," the judge commanded, hammering his gavel. "Mrs. Harmon, control yourself immediately or you'll be removed." The recording continued relentlessly. A man's accented voice, now identified as one of the arrested international investors, said calmly, "Don't be difficult about this, Mr. Harmon. Unfortunate accidents happen to problematic people all the time." "They certainly do," Dad's voice replied with surprising calm. "That's precisely why I'm wearing a wire and why this entire conversation is being transmitted to secure storage as we speak." The prosecutor paused the playback. "What happened after this recording was made, Ms. Harmon?" "According to the medical examiner's revised report following exhumation, my father was poisoned with a specialized substance that perfectly mimicked heart attack symptoms. He died 3 days later, after collecting final evidence." Vivian, testifying under immunity as part of her plea agreement, was called next to the stand. "It wasn't supposed to end in death," she said, deliberately avoiding looking in my direction. "The initial plan was simply to frighten Lawrence into compliance." "Who ultimately gave the order for more permanent measures?" the prosecutor asked directly. Vivian hesitated only briefly. "Gwendolyn. She informed our investment partners that Lawrence had become an unacceptable liability. They were growing increasingly concerned about exposure of the entire laundering network." "You backstabbing traitor." Gwendolyn lunged across the table toward her sister, requiring 2 court officers to restrain her as she shouted obscenities. The judge immediately called a recess. In the marble-floored hallway outside, Paige hugged me tightly. "You're handling this amazingly well," she whispered, her photographer's eye capturing every emotional detail. "Lawrence would be incredibly proud of your strength." Bennett approached with Garrett, who still wore a sling but was recovering well. "The FBI forensic accounting team has completed tracking all the offshore accounts connected to Queen's acquisitions. They've successfully frozen every asset." "That's excellent news," I said, feeling a weight lifting. "Does that mean the retirement funds can be fully restored to the original investors Dad was trying to protect?" Bennett nodded, a rare smile crossing his normally serious face. "Your father's final contingency plan worked perfectly. The marina project will proceed exactly as he envisioned it, affordable housing with integrated healthcare facilities." Federal courthouse testimony continues. Back in session, the prosecutor methodically presented the financial evidence. Elaborate charts displayed the complex web of shell companies, the systematically diverted funds, the meticulously falsified documents, all leading directly back to Gwendolyn and Vivian. "And what was the total amount laundered through the marina project according to the forensic accounting team?" the prosecutor asked, placing her hands on the witness stand rail. $83 million, I answered clearly, my voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. "Money that was originally earmarked for affordable housing, stolen from retirement accounts, pension funds, and social impact investment groups that believed in my father's vision." Gwendolyn's high-priced defense attorney tried desperately to paint her as an unwitting participant manipulated by her more sophisticated sister and the international investors. He emphasized her public charitable works and social connections, but the mountain of evidence was simply overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours before reaching their verdict. On the count of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Gwendolyn Harmon, guilty, the jury foreperson announced firmly. On the counts of money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty on all charges. Gwendolyn's perfect composure finally shattered completely. She screamed as federal marshals led her away, her designer heels skidding on the polished floor. "This isn't over, Meredith. You'll regret the day you crossed me. I have friends you haven't even met yet." Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us in a sea of microphones and cameras. "Ms. Harmon, what happens to the marina project now?" shouted a journalist from the front row. I stepped confidently to the bank of microphones, Bennett and Page flanking me supportively. The original plan will proceed exactly as my father intended: affordable housing for seniors with integrated healthcare services, built honestly and legally. Harmon Enterprises will continue his legacy of ethical business practices and community-focused development. No shortcuts, no schemes, just fair deals and responsible stewardship. The marina celebration. Later that evening, our small group gathered on Dad's beloved boat. Bennett handed around glasses of champagne, Dad's favorite vintage that he'd been saving for a special occasion. To Lawrence, he said, raising his glass with rare emotion, who orchestrated the perfect response to corruption from beyond the grave. To Dad, I echoed, the boat gently rocking beneath us, who taught me that justice is always worth fighting for, no matter the personal cost. Page pointed to a small package resting on the captain's chair. This just arrived from the evidence processing department. They've officially released it back to the family. Inside, wrapped in protective plastic, I found Dad's personal journal. The last entry, dated March 15th, read in his distinctive handwriting, "My dearest Meredith, if you're reading these words, the truth has finally come to light. I'm deeply sorry I couldn't share everything with you while I was alive, but I needed to protect you from the dangers I was facing. Remember what I always told you about karma: the goal isn't revenge but restoration of balance. You are my greatest achievement and joy, not any business deal, building, or development project. I know in my heart you'll make the right choices to carry forward what truly matters. All my love always, Dad." Garrett cleared his throat, his injured shoulder healing well. "The FBI has asked if you'd be willing to provide testimony against the remaining international investors in the upcoming trial next month." I looked around at my support team, Page, Bennett, Garrett, all brought together by Dad's extraordinary foresight and final plan. "Of course I will," I said without hesitation. "We'll finish what he started, completely." The marina lights reflected off the dark water, creating dancing patterns of light on the boat's white hull. Somewhere, I hoped Dad was watching, knowing his true legacy was secure, not just the company or the marina project itself, but his real, lasting legacy, the unwavering commitment to truth, integrity, and justice. And Gwendolyn, she had learned the hardest way possible that karma remembers what others forget. Dad had remembered. And so would I. Epilogue. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the large windows of Dad's office, my office now, as I cleared the last of Gwendolyn's abandoned possessions from the storage closet. Each item told its own story of deception: falsified documents hidden in expensive leather portfolios, USB drives cleverly disguised as luxury cosmetics, a secondary phone filled with encrypted messages to offshore contacts. "Meredith, come quickly," Paige called excitedly from the archives room. She emerged holding a dusty architectural model covered in protective sheeting. "Look what was hidden behind the file cabinets, Lawrence's original vision for the marina project. He preserved it." I smiled, running my fingers along the miniature buildings and tiny trees, marveling at the detailed community spaces. Even after they tried so hard to corrupt and transform his vision. The intercom buzzed on my desk. "Ms. Harmon, the first residents have arrived for the orientation tour." My heart beat faster as I walked to the lobby, straightening my blazer. An elderly couple stood there, holding hands in their completed housing applications, looking both hopeful and slightly nervous. "Welcome to Marina Gardens," I said warmly, extending my hand. "I'm Meredith Harmon." "We simply can't believe these rental rates are real," the woman said, eyes bright with emotion. "When our previous building went luxury, everyone said we'd have to leave the neighborhood we've lived in for 40 years, but this is a miracle. My father believed deeply that everyone deserves a safe, dignified place to call home, I replied, feeling his presence in that moment. Please, let me show you around your new community. As we toured the completed complex, I saw Dad's dream transformed into living reality. Community gardens bursting with vegetables and flowers, a modern medical clinic with reduced-cost services, inviting social spaces where seniors gathered playing cards and sharing stories, everything he had fought and ultimately sacrificed himself to protect. Bennett met us in the central courtyard, legal documents in hand, his usual serious expression softened by satisfaction. The final portion of the recovered funds has been returned to the original investors, he reported, then paused, allowing himself a rare smile. And Gwendolyn's last appeal was unanimously denied by the circuit court yesterday. That's excellent news, I said. Any updates on the evidence room inventory? That's actually why I came by in person. We found something else significant. Back in the privacy of Dad's MIA office, Bennett carefully unlocked a previously hidden panel behind the family photograph. Inside was a small personal safe I'd never seen before. The FBI forensic team discovered this during their final sweep, he explained, entering a sequence. They determined the code was your birth date. The safe door swung open to reveal a sealed letter and a small velvet jewelry box. The letter was in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My dearest Meredith, if you're reading this, you've successfully uncovered the complete truth and brought those responsible to justice. There's one final thing you should know. The day Gwendolyn entered our lives, something felt wrong. Call it instinct, call it experience from years in business, but I began planning defensively immediately. The Marina project wasn't only about housing. It evolved into a deliberate trap for anyone who might try to corrupt it. Inside this box is your mother's locket, which I've kept safe all these years. I always told you it was lost after her passing, but I was waiting for the right moment. Inside is a photo of the three of us taken the day you were born. This is your true inheritance and legacy, not the business empire, not the buildings, but the love of family and the courage to stand firmly for what's right. I'm profoundly sorry I couldn't shield you from the pain of losing me, but I hope I taught you enough to protect yourself from those who would cause harm. Remember always, karma isn't about vengeance, it's about restoring proper balance to the world. You've accomplished that restoration beautifully. I love you eternally, Dad. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the delicate gold locket. The tiny photograph inside was slightly faded but perfectly clear, Mom in her hospital bed looking radiant despite her exhaustion, Dad beaming with unmistakable pride, and newborn me sleeping peacefully, unaware of the journey ahead. There's one more item, Bennett said gently, pointing to the safe's back panel. A final USB drive was securely taped there. The single file it contained was a video, Dad sitting in this very office, recorded on the morning of March 15th, the day everything changed. Good morning, my incredible daughter, he began, his eyes crinkling with the smile I missed so deeply. If you're watching this, then everything has gone according to plan. The evidence was sufficient, the perpetrators were caught, the funds have been recovered, and the Marina project is becoming exactly what it was always meant to be. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression intensifying. But far more importantly than any of that, you have proven what I've always known with absolute certainty, that you are stronger than any challenge life presents, more intelligent than any scheme or deception, and infinitely more capable than you have ever imagined yourself to be. We located his actual, complete medical records, Garrett added, entering the office quietly. He knew they were slowly poisoning him through his evening scotch. He could have stopped drinking it, saved himself, but then we wouldn't have gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire network. The full weight of his sacrifice hit me anew. Paige squeezed my hand supportively as Dad's video continued. Don't spend too long mourning me, sweetheart. Instead, celebrate what we created together and what you'll build in the future. Your mother would be tremendously proud of the woman you've become. I certainly am, beyond words. The video ended with his familiar smile. Through the large windows, I watched new residents moving into Marina Gardens, carrying small plants for their balconies, grandchildren helping with boxes, lives beginning fresh chapters. Each person represented a promise fulfilled, a life improved, a community preserved. Are you ready for the official ribbon-cutting ceremony? Bennett asked, checking his watch. I carefully fastened Mom's locket around my neck, feeling its weight, light but significant, against my skin. Almost ready. On Dad's beautifully restored desk, I arranged 3 items together: the recovered architectural model of Marina Gardens, the framed locket photo of our family, and his lucky fishing hat from the boat, not a shrine to what was lost, but a testament to what endures. Now I'm ready, I said with quiet confidence. Outside, a sizable crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. As I approached the podium, the morning sun caught Mom's gold locket, sending tiny sparkles of light dancing across the upturned faces. Perfect karma, perfect balance, exactly as Dad had envisioned. He was right, this journey wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about protecting vulnerable people, about doing what's right even when, especially when, it's the hardest path to choose. I picked up the ceremonial scissors, ready to cut the ribbon and open not just a building, but a new chapter, not only for myself but for everyone who had been given a second chance through one extraordinary man's final, brilliant act of foresight and love.